You know already its types, and you know already its different effects. This time, we're going to talk about the second type of energy which is present here on Earth, which we call gravity.
In this video, you will infer how gravity affects movements of objects and people, and show that external conditions affect the movement of objects and people. To see how much you already know about gravity, let's try these easy questions. Get a pen and paper now to write down your answers for checking later. You can pause the video to read each question so that you'll have enough time. Are you ready? Let's begin. Identify what is asked or described in each item, then choose the letter of your choice. Number 1. How does gravity affect the motion of objects? A. It keeps objects afloat. B. It pulls objects toward the ground. C. It pushes objects away from the ground. D. It alternately pulls and pushes objects to and from the ground. Number 2. What happens to the movement of an object as it goes up? A. It stops. B. It speeds up. C. It slows down. D. It starts to float. Number 3. What happens to objects thrown either up, to the right, or to the left? A. It expands. B. It disappears. C. It starts to float. D. It falls to the ground. Number 4. How does air resistance affect moving objects? A. It helps them move faster. B. It makes them stop immediately. C. It does not affect moving objects. D. It acts as a force in the opposite direction of the moving object. Number 5. As the mass of the object increases, what will happen to the pull of gravity in the absence of air resistance? A. It increases. B. It decreases. C. It stays the same. D. It cannot be determined. Before we dive into our activities on gravity, let's guess these keywords that we're going to meet along the way. Complete the words described with the missing letters. Number 1. The attraction due to gravity that the Earth or another astronomical object exerts on an object on or near its surface. Number 2. It is an ideal state in which the only force to which something is subjected is the Earth's gravitational attraction. Number 3. It is the force that is in opposition to the relative motion of an object as it passes through the air.
In the first activity that we're going to have for gravity, we're going to describe how it affects the movements of objects. In this activity, we're going to need one object only found in your home. In this case, a rubber ball. If you don't have any rubber ball at home, you can look for anything light, which can be a substitute for this. So what are you going to do? First setup is you're going to throw the ball upwards, and you're going to observe what happens to it as it travels. Are you ready? What happened to the ball as it traveled? What happened to the ball after it reached its maximum point or its maximum height? What made the ball do that? For the second setup, we are going to throw the ball to our left. Are you ready? What happened? Take note of your observations in your notebook. For the third setup, we will throw the ball this time to our right. Are you ready? Please note your observations in your activity notebook. For the last setup, we are going to observe how the ball is affected by gravity if we let it roll forward on the floor. Are you ready? Okay. What happened to the ball? Did it stay on the ground or did it float?
For the following guide questions, please do not forget to write down your answers in your activity notebook. You can pause the video to give you time to think and answer. Setup A. Ball thrown upward. Number 1. What happened to the ball that was thrown upward after it reached its highest point? Setup B. Ball thrown to the left and to the right. Number 2. What happened to the ball that was thrown to the left or to the right? Setup C. Ball rolled forward on the ground. Number 3. What happened to the ball that was rolled on the ground? Number 4. What force made the ball behave the way it did? Keep this in mind. Everything on Earth is affected by gravity. It is the force that pulls everything down toward the ground or the earth. Objects thrown or kicked upward fall back to the earth after reaching its highest point. A note worth remembering: as the objects thrown upward is traveling up, it is gradually slowing down, momentarily stopping at its highest peak. As it falls back to the ground, it is speeding up because of gravity. Objects thrown or kicked to the left or to the right fall back to the ground as well. Objects that are rolled, pushed, or pulled across the ground will remain on the ground. It will roll or move to the direction it was made to move for some time before stopping due to gravity and friction, but it stays on the ground and will not float off. To apply what you've learned so far, describe the most possible outcome of the following scenarios. Number 1. A cargo from a flying airplane tumbles off the plane. Number 2. A helium-filled balloon floats up but eventually bursts at a certain height. Number 3. A ball that was not caught by a player during a basketball game. Number 4. A small toy car rolled forward by a boy. Number 5. A huge rock pushed off the edge of a cliff.
Congratulations mga bata! Tapos na kayo sa isang activity regarding gravity. You already know how gravity affects objects when they are moving. This time, we are going to talk about the different factors that can affect the movement of different objects. In this activity, we are going to need the following materials. These are the only materials that we're going to need. I have here 2 sheets of papers of the same kind, of the same type, and of the same thickness, and of the same mass. Pareho ang bigat, pareho ang klase, pareho ang laki. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to crumple 1 sheet of paper into a paper ball, while I'm going to keep the shape of this other paper. Ang gagawin natin is, we're going to drop these 2 papers at the same time, at the same height. And we're going to observe which of these 2 papers will fall to the ground first. Do you have any guesses? Please take note of your guesses in your activity notebook. Now, let's do our activity. Let's do the first trial. Let's drop these 2 papers at the same time from the same height. Observe closely and note your answers in your activity notebook. Are you ready? Did you see that? Trial number 2. Ready? For the last trial. 1, 2, 3. Which of these 2 papers reached the ground first? The flat one or the crumpled one? Why do you think so? Please take note of your answers in your activity notebook and answer the guide questions on the slides.
To summarize your observations, copy the table shown on the screen and follow the instructions. You can pause the video to give you time. Write the results of the trials in the table, then answer the guide questions. In the table below, indicate which paper landed first by writing first and which landed last by writing second. For the following guide questions, please do not forget to write down your answers in your activity notebook. You can pause the video to give you time to think and answer. Number 1. What forces were affecting the 2 papers as they were falling to the ground? Number 2. Which of the 2 types of papers landed first on the ground? Why is that so? Number 3. Which of the 2 types of papers landed last? Why is that so? Number 4. What property or characteristic of the paper made it land first? And number 5. What property or characteristic of the paper made it land last? Keep this in mind. On Earth, gravity is not the only force that is acting on an object. Frictional force is also present. For objects that are underground or that are in contact with other objects, the effects of frictional force and its presence is easily observed and can easily be pointed out. In objects that are falling, such as the two papers in the experiment, where does frictional force come in? The frictional force is provided by the air resistance from the air particles surrounding and interacting with the papers before, during, and after their fall. For the sheet of paper, since it has a larger surface area, it interacts more with the air particles surrounding it. Hence, there is greater air resistance. In the case of the crumpled paper, however, the surface area is relatively smaller compared to the sheet. This then decreases the amount of air particles interacting with the crumpled paper, and so, less air resistance. Since the crumpled paper has less air resistance, it falls faster than the sheet of paper even though they are both acted on by the same gravity. To apply what you've learned so far, choose which of the two choices in each item has less air resistance and so will fall faster. Number 1. Ripe fruit or a leaf on the same height on a tree. Number 2. A skydiver spreading his legs and arms, or a skydiver who positioned in a tight ball free falling from a plane 11,000 meters from sea level. Number 3. An empty plastic bag and a barbecue stick dropped from the same height of a passing public utility bus. Number 4. A flat cardboard box and a full bottle of alcohol dropped from the third floor of a building. Number 5. A folded blanket and a spread out blanket, both thrown from the top of a cliff. To help you summarize and reflect on what you've learned in this video, please accomplish these sentence prompts. To strengthen what you have learned in this video, please perform the following task. Watch a video discussing gravity on YouTube. Please use the link below. To get to know the terms more, remember our word bank. Gravity. The attraction due to the gravitation that the Earth or another astronomical object exerts on an object on or near its surface. Free fall. An ideal state in which the only force to which something is subjected is the Earth's gravitational attraction. Air resistance. The forces that are in opposition to the relative motion of an object as it passes through the air. Let us test your learnings. Get a paper and pen and let's answer the post test. You can pause the video on each question to give you time to think and answer. Identify what is asked or described in each item, then choose the letter of your choice. Number 1. How does gravity affect the motion of objects? A. It keeps objects afloat. B. It pulls objects toward the ground. C. It pushes objects away from the ground. D. It alternately pulls and pushes objects to and from the ground. Number 2. What would happen to an object thrown upward after reaching its highest point? A. It will float. B. It will fall down. C. It will continue moving up. D. It will move to the left or right. Number 3. What happens to the movement of an object as it goes up? A. It stops. B. It speeds up. C. It slows down. D. It starts to float. Number 4. What happens to objects thrown either up, to the right, or to the left? A. It expands. B. It disappears. C. It starts to float. D. It falls to the ground. Number 5. What will happen to a man who is standing on solid ground if he starts walking? Letter A. He will float. B. He will stay on the ground. C. He will not be able to move. D. He will stay on the ground and cover distance. Number 6. Which of the following objects will be most affected by air resistance? A. A falling feather. B. A car driving down the freeway. C. A person sliding backward down the hill. D. All the options are correct. Number 7. How does air resistance affect moving objects? A. It helps them move faster. B. It makes them stop immediately. C. It does not affect moving objects. D. It acts as a force in the opposite direction of the moving object. Number 8. As the mass of the object increases, what will happen to the pull of gravity in the absence of air resistance? A. It increases. B. It decreases. C. It stays the same. D. It cannot be determined. Number 9. Which of the following is not an application of gravity? A. Rainfall. B. Falling leaves. C. Burning paper. D. Airplane on a flight. Number 10. Which of the following situations show the presence of gravity? 1. Pouring rain. 2. Stone sinks in the pool. 3. Leaf falls from the branch of a tree. 4. Garbage floats and scatters in the air. A. 1 and 2. B. 2 and 3. C. 1, 2, and 3. D. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Congratulations! You've just finished the video lesson on gravity.